In 1590, Agnes Sampson's screams echoed through the stone walls of Edinburgh Castle as guards forced a metal cage over her head, iron spikes pressing against her tongue. But that's not even the worst part. What you're looking at is called a scold's bridle, and by the end of this video, you'll understand why historians tried to bury this story for centuries. Because this wasn't just about punishing criminals. This was about silencing women forever. I'm about to reveal 3 shocking truths that will change how you see medieval justice forever. First, this torture device still exists in museums today, and you can visit it right now. Second, it wasn't just used on accused witches, but on ordinary wives whose husbands thought they talked too much. And third, one woman was forced to wear this metal nightmare for 4 straight years. Yet she refused to stay silent. Here's what makes this even more disturbing. If you're watching this video right now, there's a 90% chance you're not subscribed to this channel. But after you hear what I'm about to tell you, you'll want to hit that subscribe button, because this story gets so much darker than you think. Don't click away yet, because what happened to these women will make your blood run cold. Picture medieval England. The year is 1500, and society has one fundamental fear: women who speak their minds. The justice system wasn't just about punishing crime. It was obsessed with controlling speech, especially women's speech. They believed that a woman's voice held dangerous power, the power to spread gossip, cast spells, or worst of all, challenge male authority. But here's what history books won't tell you. This wasn't random cruelty. This was systematic oppression disguised as law and order. The scold's bridle, also known as the gossip's bridle or witch's bridle, was specifically designed to torture one part of the human body, the tongue. Because to medieval authorities, a woman's tongue was her most dangerous weapon. Imagine you're a woman in 1600. You argue with your husband about household decisions. You defend yourself in court. You speak up at church. Any of these actions could land you in the town square, metal cage locked around your head, iron spikes piercing your mouth if you dared to make a sound. Now, you might be thinking this was just about witches and criminals. You're wrong. Court records show that ordinary housewives, market vendors, and even women defending their own property ended up wearing these devices. Why does this matter today? Because this story reveals something terrifying about how societies have always feared women's voices. The methods have changed, but the fear remains the same. But the scold's bridle was just the beginning of this nightmare. What I'm about to show you next will prove that medieval torture masters designed this device with one specific goal: to cause maximum psychological and physical pain every single time a woman tried to speak. Stay with me, because the engineering behind this torture will shock you into understanding just how calculated this cruelty really was. The year is 1655. Newcastle court records detail exactly what happened when they brought out the scold's bridle for Margaret Fernside, accused of scolding her betters. But here's what nobody tells you about the engineering behind this torture device. Every component was designed with surgical precision to maximize suffering. The iron cage wrapped around the woman's entire head. But the real horror was inside. A flat iron piece called the bit pressed down on the tongue. But this wasn't just a gag. Look closer. See those iron spikes? They're positioned exactly where the tongue naturally rests. The moment a woman tried to speak, move her tongue, or even swallow saliva, those spikes would pierce the soft tissue. Medieval blacksmiths weren't just making restraints. They were creating precision torture instruments. Here's where it gets worse. The bit was adjustable. Court officials could tighten or loosen the mechanism, depending on the severity of the woman's crime. Talking back to your husband, light pressure. Accused of witchcraft, they'd tighten it until blood pooled in your mouth. Margaret Fernside's case file describes her rebellion in horrifying detail. When guards first locked the bridle onto her head, she tried to speak once. The spikes pierced her tongue so deeply that witnesses reported blood streaming down her chin and staining her dress. But the physical pain was only half the torture. The psychological warfare was even more brutal. Women wearing Scold's bridle were paraded through town squares as public entertainment. Crowds would gather, pointing and laughing, at the metal cage locked around her head. Children threw stones. Men made crude jokes about finally finding a way to shut up their wives. The woman couldn't defend herself, couldn't explain her side of the story, couldn't even cry out in pain without driving iron deeper into her flesh. Margaret Fernside wore her bridle for 4 straight years.
Bridle for 6 hours in Newcastle's town square. 6 hours of silent agony while hundreds of people mocked her suffering. And when they finally unlocked the device, her tongue was so damaged she couldn't speak properly for weeks. But wait until you see what happened to repeat offenders, because Margaret's story was considered merciful compared to what's coming next. The case I'm about to reveal will show you just how far authorities will go to silence women permanently. Scotland, 1590. Agnes Sampson stands accused of witchcraft, and King James VI himself has ordered her interrogation. What happens next will haunt you, but here's what makes Agnes's case different. She wasn't just some random accused witch. She was a midwife, a healer, a woman whose medical knowledge made powerful men uncomfortable, and they were determined to break her. The Scottish witch trial transcripts reveal horrifying details that most historians prefer to skip over. Agnes wore the Scold's bridle for 3 consecutive days, 72 hours of iron spikes pressing against her tongue, unable to eat, drink, or speak. Here's the part that will make your stomach turn. They didn't just lock it on and leave her alone. Every few hours, interrogators would ask her questions, knowing that any attempt to answer would drive the spikes deeper into her mouth. Are you a witch, Agnes? Silence meant guilt. Speaking meant agony. They had engineered the perfect psychological trap. But Agnes Sampson was stronger than they anticipated. Court records show that even with blood streaming from her mouth, even with infected wounds from the iron spikes, she refused to confess to crimes she didn't commit. So they escalated the torture. They tightened the bridle mechanism. The iron bit pressed so hard against her tongue that witnesses reported she couldn't swallow her own saliva. It pooled in her mouth and spilled out around the metal cage. Day 3, infection had set in. Medieval medicine meant no antibiotics, no pain relief, no hope of proper healing. Agnes's tongue had swollen so badly that the spikes were permanently embedded in the tissue. Here's what chills me to the bone. The interrogators kept detailed notes about her physical deterioration. They were conducting a medical experiment in human suffering, documenting exactly how long a woman could endure this torture before breaking. Agnes never confessed. After 3 days, they removed the bridle and executed her anyway. But not before she had proven something that terrified the authorities. She had shown that even their most sophisticated torture couldn't break a determined woman's spirit. And that's exactly why they decided to make the punishment worse for the next generation of difficult women. But Agnes Sampson's case was nothing compared to what I discovered about ordinary housewives who ended up in these devices. And that's not even the worst case I found, because the story I'm about to tell you will reveal how husbands became judge, jury, and executioner in their own homes. Here's where this story takes a turn that will make you question everything you thought you knew about medieval marriage. English common law between 1500 and 1700 included a provision that most legal historians tried to ignore. Husbands could legally petition local magistrates to have their wives fitted with Scold's bridles for excessive talking or disobedience. Let that sink in. Your husband could have you tortured by the state for talking back. The legal precedents are documented in shocking detail. In 1567, Thomas Hartley successfully petitioned York magistrates to bridle his wife Elizabeth because she did argue with household decisions and speak against her husband's judgment in public. Elizabeth's crime? She had disagreed with her husband about selling their cow. But here's what makes this even more disturbing. The legal system required no evidence beyond a husband's word. No witnesses, no proof of wrongdoing, just a man's complaint that his wife talked too much. The process was horrifyingly simple. A husband would approach local authorities and file a complaint of scolding. Within days, constables would arrive at the family home, lock the iron cage around the woman's head, and parade her through town. The message was clear. This could happen to any woman, any time, for any reason a man deemed sufficient. Church records from the 1600s reveal that Sunday sermons regularly reminded wives that a silent woman is a godly woman and warned them that scold's bridles awaited those who forgot their place. Imagine living with that threat hanging over your head every single day. Every disagreement with your husband, every opinion you voiced, every time you defended yourself, you risked having iron spikes driven into your tongue. But the most chilling part? Legal records show that some husbands used the threat of the scold's bridle to control their wives for years without ever actually using it. The psychological terror was enough. Hold your tongue, wife, or I'll have the magistrate hold it for you.
These weren't isolated cases. Between 1500 and 1700, hundreds of English women were bridled at their husbands' requests. The legal system had essentially weaponized domestic abuse. And here's what really gets me. Many of these women were never accused of any crime other than speaking their minds in their own homes. But the final story will shock you into silence because I discovered one woman who faced this torture for 4 straight years and refused to let it break her spirit. What Dorothy Ward did next changed everything, and her story will leave you speechless. The year is 1655. Dorothy Ward, a 23-year-old Quaker preacher, stands in a Carlisle courtroom facing the most extreme sentence ever recorded in scold's bridal history. 4 years. 4 years of wearing the iron cage for the crime of preaching without a license. But here's what makes Dorothy's story absolutely extraordinary. She refused to let them silence her. Court records from Carlisle show that local magistrates were furious that a young woman dared to preach in public. Quaker women were already controversial for speaking in religious meetings, but Dorothy had taken it further. She preached on street corners, in marketplaces, anywhere crowds would listen. The authorities thought 4 years in a scold's bridle would break her spirit permanently. They were wrong. Here's where this story becomes legendary. Dorothy found ways to communicate without speaking. She developed a complex system of hand gestures to continue preaching. She wrote messages on scraps of paper and distributed them secretly. She even learned to hum through the iron cage, turning her torture device into an instrument of defiance. But the most incredible part? Other women started copying her methods. Across northern England, women began learning Dorothy's gesture language. They passed coded messages through networks of supporters. They turned the scold's bridle from a symbol of oppression into a symbol of resistance. The authorities panicked. Their perfect torture device was backfiring spectacularly. Letters between magistrates revealed their growing frustration. Dorothy Ward had done the impossible. She had made the scold's bridle ineffective. Women were no longer afraid of it. Some even volunteered to wear it in solidarity with Dorothy. After 4 years, they released her early, not out of mercy, out of desperation. Dorothy had proven that no device could truly silence a determined woman's voice. And here's the twist that changes everything. Dorothy's resistance sparked the beginning of organized women's rights awareness in England. Her methods spread to other movements. Her story inspired generations of women who refused to be silenced. The last recorded legal use of a scold's bridle was in 1856, over 200 years later. But historians directly trace the beginning of the end to Dorothy Ward's 4-year stand in Carlisle. Today, scold's bridles are banned worldwide as torture devices. They sit in museums as reminders of humanity's capacity for cruelty. But they also represent something else. Proof that even the most sophisticated oppression can't break the human spirit. Dorothy Ward transformed a torture device into a symbol of courage. She showed that silence can be more powerful than screaming, that resistance can take forms that authorities never anticipate. And that's why her story matters today, because the fight to silence women's voices never really ended. From torture device to symbol of resilience, that's the real story of the scold's bridle. But here's what keeps me awake at night: how society still tries to silence women today. The methods have evolved: social media harassment, professional retaliation, public shaming campaigns. The iron spikes are gone, but the intention remains the same: make women afraid to speak their minds. Dorothy Ward's legacy lives on in every woman who refuses to be silenced, every woman who speaks up in boardrooms, courtrooms, and public squares, every woman who uses her voice to challenge injustice.
So here's my question for you, and really think about this. What would you have done in Dorothy's place? Would you have found ways to keep fighting? Or would the iron spikes have broken your spirit? Drop your honest answer in the comments because I read every single one. And speaking of brutal medieval punishments that shaped modern society, next week I'm revealing the shocking truth about trial by ordeal, including one method so disturbing that it was banned by the Pope himself. Make sure you're subscribed and hit the notification bell so you don't miss it. Thanks for watching, and remember, your voice matters.